How's it going? What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Bending Ballistics show. So, we are joined with a very special guest today that I have struggled with my schedule and his schedule trying to get him on. We have been working on this for months trying to correlate with each other when we can get together. But I'll let him introduce himself. But here's Bullets for Bucks.
Yeah, howdy folks. So name's Stephen Bresna. I have a YouTube channel as well where I do gun content, optics content, and like hunting films, some other stuff as well, some fishing films. But I live in Wyoming. I don't mind saying too much about myself, but yeah. So right now is hunting season, so that's what I've been busy doing is basically out hunting. That's what I was doing all day yesterday, and glad to be on the podcast or live stream here today.
Yeah, I appreciate you being on. Um, uh, So, what really got you into firearms? Like, I asked this question to everybody, and everybody's story is a little bit different. And so I'm curious, like, what got you into it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think mine's as traditional as other people's. So I tend to answer long. I grew up in a family that wasn't anti-gun, but didn't have guns and didn't hunt and things like that. So I'm still kind of the wildcat or whatever, the odd one out. Um, I think what really got me into firearms was probably the fact that I went into law enforcement or got involved in law enforcement. I think that's probably the main thing. I also did in my teens, actually. I didn't start hunting till I was pretty old, but in my teens, I went hunting a couple times. I shot guns at friends' houses, things like that. And I enjoyed it. So like the seed was probably planted then, but it took a long time for it to germinate. So I would say a combination of that, and then of course anything law enforcement. For the most part, you're going to have exposure to guns and whatnot, and I enjoyed it. So over the course of years, slowly got into it, but really didn't until I was already in my 20s.
Gotcha. No, I get that. And that is a way different story, but the amount of people that you see that come from, I guess, anti-firearms, they're not really anti-firearms, but they're not really exposed to it, that end up going into law enforcement is a crazy high number.
Yeah.
Even when I was in the academy, there were people that there was never a firearm in their house, nothing like that. And then we're in the academy doing firearms training, and they're like, I don't even know how to do this. Like, what is
Yeah.
this?
Yeah,
And it's,
yeah, I definitely made fun of a lot of people like later on. Like I think I've been through three law enforcement academies successfully, and I think the first one I was probably really green. And then, the next ones I'm like, what do you mean you're an idiot? You don't know what, but forgetting from where I came. But yeah, because I mean I had pretty I mean at 16 I did buy a 22 or a Ruger 10/22, which I was the only one in my family who owned a gun. And and for years was and I'm the youngest of my siblings. And then so I did enjoy shooting that. I almost forgot about that. So I did enjoy shooting that, but that was actually I was probably 17, which where I live now in Wyoming, that's like kids start at like 6. But um yeah, but I had really limited, especially with pistols, I had really limited exposure going into law enforcement.
now, do you still shoot a lot of pistols now, or are you still more mostly rifle, or are you kind of mix of both? I've been seeing some pistol stuff come out on yours, but
Yeah, mostly bolt action rifles. I do have more pistol stuff coming out. And things I ended up moving and remodeling a house this year. Things got kind of crazy, but I actually registered for USPSA and set up a pistol for it. And I went to a couple functions. I don't even think any of them were record kept, but I went to a couple functions, shot a little bit. Um, and initially, like, it seems okay. I don't enjoy shooting pistols as much, but I enjoyed it enough. And just like doing the little things I'd done seemed to do well enough. But I was planning on doing a bunch of that, and it all got put on the side burner. But I'm planning on probably, hopefully, hopefully tentatively starting back up doing that either this winter or next spring,
Hmm.
at a local range, and getting back kind of more into pistols, because I kind of was into pistols a little bit and then spent 5 years doing bolt action stuff, and then picking up the pistol more again. It's like, wow, I've really kind of gotten deficient in a sense, as well as just don't really know the stuff as well. And truth is I never will probably enjoy it as much as bolt actions, but I do want to dabble in it more than I have, for sure. I mean, most of my pistol shooting throughout the years was just like qualifications for work or practicing for qualifications for work, which really most places is actually pretty easy, almost too easy,
Yeah.
probably. So
Oh, I agree. So we're gonna run through this list real quick of all the people that we got here. So we have Mr. John H with us. We have Mr. Jeff B. We have Boom Country Hydrographics. If you ever need a rifle Cerakoted, I'm send it to Boom Country. He's probably one of the best Cerakoters in the country. We have Del Pogue with us. We have David Wilcott, Jeff B., the Pimp 1984, Vanessa Kitty, MC, Alaskan One Andy, and that's all we got with us right now. As people pop in, we'll say hello. But yeah, I mean, pistol disciplines are a lot different than rifle disciplines for sure. Like I even find myself struggling with it with shooting because I do shoot a lot of 3 gun still, so I still do get a lot of pistol practice. But now that I'm running a lot of bolt actions too, I really can feel that skill set diminishing, if that makes sense at all.
yeah,
Of
I
where
mean,
it's like,
yeah, it seems really hard to keep multiple disciplines proficient, even on a recreational like basis. I mean, and people will be like, well, if you shoot a pistol good, you'll shoot a bolt action good or something, which is total BS in my opinion. Like they're quite a bit different. I mean, one you're using, you got to know your dope, you're dialing with a scope potentially, there's just way big differences, and vice versa. If you're good at shooting a bolt action, you could suck at shooting a pistol. Um, the only thing that's even close is maybe like just the trigger control, and that's about it. I mean, that's my opinion anyway. I mean, everything
yeah.
else is pretty different.
No, I agree with you. It's just like shooting a bolt action rifle and shooting a semi-automatic rifle. The skill set that's needed to shoot a semi-auto accurately, yes, I won't argue that a bolt action is more inherently accurate than a semi-auto, but being able to shoot a semi-auto as accurate as you can shoot a bolt action is a completely different skill set. What's your opinion?
I don't have a lot of opinion on that, because I don't do, I mean, I have several ARs, but I really don't shoot them a whole lot. And when I do, it's just standing. I'm not using most of the time. I guess I some of the time I use rests and things like that. I mean, there's definitely a difference. Like I'm not that good with an AR, but I put very little money and time into it. And that's really the only, I mean, other than like a 10-22 or shotguns, that's for the most part the only semi-autos, long guns that I own. Um, but I mean, I think there's more crossover to shooting an AR to a bolt action than shooting a bolt action to a pistol. I'll put it that
Oh,
way.
I
And
100%.
because depending on your shooting position and things like that, but um, I mean, there certainly is differences as well. Um, but I mean, this year almost exclusively I've shot like lightweight hunting rifles.
Hmm.
Um, and each year, like I had plans to do, and I still have some plans to do some ELR recreation, just like, on my own for film, shooting at a range, but I haven't gotten around to it yet this year. There was so many, last year I was going to go to a range and I was going to shoot a bunch of film at like 2,000 yards and all this. And last year it was like a supply and cost problem. And then this year it's like I got busy, and it's just, uh, those things come up. But I do want to do a bunch of just recreational beyond like 1,200 yard shooting next year. And I moved not very far from where I was, but I found a new area I might be able to shoot beyond 1,000 yards closer, because most of where it's open area out here, but really there's not many places that I can easily shoot beyond like 800 yards still. So the range I go to unfortunately only goes to 840, and it's really annoying. It's got a bunch of restrictions, but I'm found a spot I might be able to shoot beyond 1,000 next year bunch. And then the other option is that I got to drive about almost 2 hours to a range, and he's got steel all the way out to like, I don't even know, 4,000 yards or something like that beyond where I'll shoot. But um, we'll see if that happens this year or next. But I definitely want to get back into that, because this year was like ultralight rifles, mostly hunting rifles, or rifles that were kind of crossover from hunting to recreational long range. So I really didn't go out to beyond 1,000 yards a whole lot this year, but
I understand that, but we have the ultimate power couple that have dropped into our channel today. We have Mr. Ron Wayne and Mrs. Misty Wayne. They have gone from 23 subs up to 10,000, over 10,000 subs in less than a month. So
what's their channel?
congratulations to you guys. I'm happy for you. That's
What
awesome.
what's the channel name? I don't know if I've seen it or not.
It's just called Ron Wayne. This oh, just type in Ron Wayne right here. He just uploads shorts, and he does long form content too. But Ron is such a good dude. He's right here in Kentucky by me. Very nice guy. Him and his wife both are just super nice, super friendly people. Such good people. So John brings up an interesting point here. He says, excuse me, it seems hunting is a whole other level, camping, hiking, one perfect shot than having to dress and pack everything out. So I'm not a huge hunter like how you are. I don't do like backwoods hunting like how you and Chuck do in Alaska and stuff like that. But help break it down a little bit for people that maybe don't do the backwoods hunting, but they're interested in it and they want to try it. Um,
Yes. Yeah. Well, hunting has many different styles depending on basically where you're located. Out in Kentucky or Michigan or things like, you might sit in a tree stand or a blind and just kind of wait. I like Western hunting because it's much more spot and stalk or spot and snipe, where you're like getting to a really high glassing point, either hiking or going on like a four-wheeler, and then glassing for miles. And then once you see something, making a play on it to either like snipe it in a sense, or to, get in close and make a shot or whatnot, to pursue it. And so the pursuit of Western hunting makes it, I feel like, more fulfilling in a way, or more like adrenaline filled in a way. It also makes it probably more physical most of the time, which I think, creates a sense of fulfillment when you finally do a harvest animal. The harder you work for something in life, generally, the more fulfilled or better you're going to feel, or higher you're going to feel when it happens, right? When you're successful. But I would encourage anybody to try hunting in general, but certainly Western hunting, either, anywhere out west, Midwest area, or Alaska. For one, there's many sides to hunting, of course, but like, conservation is funded by sale of tags and hunting licenses and things like that. And so a lot of the funding, or most of the funding for a lot of conservation, actually comes from hunting, which people don't understand, as well as like, hunters have, I think, in many ways, a more balanced view of conservation, because they're going to appreciate and want to keep wildlife sustainable and healthy, because they're depending on them for meat and for recreation. But yeah, I mean, I think Western hunting is just a blast. I mean, you go out, you have there is a lot of like more logistics in a sense. Like you really should have good equipment if you're going to go out, especially DIY in the mountains, on the mountains, because you never know what weather's going to come up. Um, and so there's definitely a lot of preparation that goes into it, but it's physically and mentally, emotionally fulfilling, I think, to hunt. Um, do you have more like specific info, like what specifics do you want to know? I mean, let's go back to can you bring that, where was that
Oh
question?
yeah, I mean, right
Camping,
there.
hiking. Yeah, so like some hunting I do is I just go from home right on day hunts, like most hunters do. Or some hunts I'll like have a camper, or you set up a wall tent on the mountain. A lot of people set up wall tents, which is just like a big outfitter tent, and they'll have like a base camp, and then from there they'll do day hunts where they just go out for the day, or they'll go out sometimes even on backpack hunts from that base camp, and then every so many days go back to the base camp. Um, so it kind of depends, like this year for my elk hunt, I drew it in an area that's not, there's plenty of trails and there's plenty of access. So like I'll still be doing a lot of physical exertion and hiking, but it's not worth it for me to like pack up a backpack with 60 pounds of gear and like tent camp in probably. So I'll have a camper actually, and it'll be usually that area gets blizzards as well, like even several feet of snow in October. So it's nice to have that. You get better sleep, more rejuvenated. Yeah, it's more sissified, but it's actually in many ways probably smarter depending on where you're going, because you can hit the day in a healthier position, if you slept well and you're not freezing. And and then from there I'll go like either on full day from with a four-wheeler. Well, I'll drive to a trailhead on a four-wheeler, and then a lot of areas are restricted to where they don't allow you to drive in any further, like it's only on foot or on horse or pack animal, which I don't have. So I'll go to a location, then you'll hike anywhere from like 1 to 5 miles, to potentially to harvest the animal. And one of the biggest things that's different about like Western hunting or hunting in remote areas is you have to pack it out. Unless you have a pack animal to pack it out, you have to pack it out on your back. So solo hunting's pretty demanding. If you have a group of friends, it makes it easier because you're gonna have to skin and quarter it right there where it fell, probably, especially with an elk. You can't drag an elk. You're literally gonna skin and quarter it right there, and you're gonna pack it out 1 or 2 quarters at a time on your back until it's all done. And sometimes that could take multiple days or in multiple trips, right? So that can be quite a large process. Um, but that's kind of the thing, I use applications like Onyx Hunt, love their mapping system and their GPS. I use it as their GPS as well, because you can use it without cell phone service. If you download the maps, you can use an airplane mode on your phone, and then you don't have to buy like a separate Garmin. You can just use it as your GPS. And so you use their mapping system, plan out your hunt, make sure you have the equipment, go out, set up a base camp, or you can hike like we did in Alaska. We went and we had everything on our backs. We're in rafts, and then we set up a base camp miles, miles off the road. Um, and then, make sure that you're prepared logistically to get it out. Um, and then you just pick a weapon system that's appropriate for the purpose, right? Appropriate for the terrain and what species you're going to be hunting, which can vary. Like for mountain goat, you might want an ultralight hunting rifle, like the Backcountry 2.0, or Christensen Ridgeline, although I don't recommend them right now. Or I debatably don't even recommend the Backcountry 2.0, or like the Fierce CT Rival, or something that's very lightweight, because you're going to probably pack it a very long ways. The caveat to that, of course, is that the lighter the rifle is, generally most people, including myself, the harder it is going to be for them to shoot it accurately and make a good shot, and especially under fatigue. And that's the huge thing. I mean, I think in competition, this can be kind of reproduced to a certain degree, and maybe
Yeah,
even to some degree greater. But I know, like in hunting, the conditions, the atmospheric conditions, right? Like rain or snow or this or that, as well as like altitude, even, but certainly like fatigue, and then the adrenaline. I think the adrenaline is different. I haven't really done competition per se to know. But like when I would shoot like qualifications, or when I went to this USPSA stuff or this or that, or when you're kind of getting into it, there's like a maybe anxiety, I feel like, with a lot, unless you compete a lot probably, but like you get anxiety, right? If you're competitive, you get competitive. But when you're hunting, it's like you can go from sheer boredom and extreme fatigue at the same time physically for hours, and then all of a sudden you have a 30-second window to make a shot, and then you have this huge adrenaline spike with most people would just say buck fever, and that can cause a lot of people to miss, right, or make poor decisions, and that's happened to me. But uh, putting shooting together with like sport in that sense, or like pursuing an animal, just to me is like the ultimate adventure in many ways. It's just a great accomplishment.
No, I understand that. And where you were talking about like um competition wise, the fatigue is definitely there, especially when you're packing a 35, 40 pound rifle for 10 or 12 hours at a time, and you've walked 5 to 8 miles across terrain that you really should have a side by side or a four wheeler at. And I go to all my matches barefooted. Like I don't wear shoes at matches, so it's that much more fatigued on me because I physically hate tennis shoes. Like I hate them. Everybody makes fun of me and say, "Well, you're definitely from Kentucky because you don't wear shoes at matches." But it's strictly just the it is what it is kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't knock it, but the fatigue is there. But there's also the other standpoint of we're only shooting still. We're not
Mm-hmm.
shooting food.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we miss a still plate, we don't have to worry about it being an unethical shot or a gut shot or anything like that. Because if you miss, like you miss, it is what it is.
Right.
Like you recover and you keep going. But the nerves are definitely there. I still remember
Yeah.
my very first match, my very first stage, very first trigger pull. Like I froze at my very first match. And before I knew it, my time was up and they were like, time. And I think I broke off 3 shots because I just
Yeah.
completely lost every bit of train of thought that I had.
Yeah. I think that like a lot of people in matches would probably feel way more anxiety or stress, especially if they're competitive in nature. I just don't know. I don't know about the adrenaline spike at the exact moment or things like that, but like definitely, I mean, if you're gonna like train to hunt, then like a PRS match or something is a great thing, right? Like that's probably as good as you're gonna get, other than actually like hunting, right? As far as applying it to hunting. Um, but yeah, you know, the adrenaline rush is great. I think when you get back to the like the ethical shooting, there's so much argument over that, right? And like I've even changed kind of my thoughts on it, kind of evolved over the years, and probably will even more as I hunt. Like it's hard because there's like, yeah, there's like kind of this general thing where like a live animal you probably shouldn't shoot at such and such a distance, like just, but then it's going to depend a lot on the person's skill set and the equipment they're using, the cartridge they're using, the animal they're hunting, and all these conditions. So it's very situational as well. um, and then some people, you know, have issues shooting live animals, even people that aren't against it, right? Like personally they have mixed feelings about it. And certainly, if you shoot an animal poorly, it's not a good feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And you should do everything in your power to not do that, which isn't the same as steel, right? Like it's way, when I go to shoot a steel plate, not in competition, just shoot a steel plate, right? At like 1,000 yards, there's no like big deal, right? It's just fun. But if you go to shoot an animal at 500 yards, maybe, depending on, like your weapon system, that could be a long way. And so
Mm-hmm.
like you could have a lot of more anxiety over that, like thoughts, and maybe you shouldn't take that shot. And then another thing people oftentimes don't think about that are new to like elk hunting is if you're up at 9,000, 10,000 feet in the backcountry and you shoot an animal poorly, you might never recover it, or even if you do, it could end up being like 4 miles in a hellhole,
Hmm.
and be a really nasty situation for yourself as well. Like it could be really difficult to recover the meat. And if you don't, it's not ethical and it's not really legal either in most places.
Yeah,
I think overconfidence with new hunters, including myself, probably when I was first starting, and even still maybe at times, is like, people, you can have all the best equipment in the world, and it can help. Like I'm not going to say it can't, but it still doesn't mean you can make a shot that you're not trained for, right?
I
And like
agree.
a lot of people are like, well, I have this, this and that and the other thing, and then let me just shot. Like I still mess up on shots. Like I shot an antelope last week and I knew better. I took the gun to Alaska. It worked great. I took it back and obviously it's like 2 feet off. So when I
Hmm.
shot this antelope, it didn't go very well. And I knew better. Like I should have gone and rechecked it when I got back from Alaska. And it's a $5,000 hunting setup, which is very expensive, especially for a hunting setup. Like that's not cheap for a hunting setup. And it still
No.
obviously has issues. Like something went wrong somewhere in the flight back. I'm assuming, stuff
Yeah.
gets banged around like crazy. But you you owe it to the animal. And even if you don't think that way, let's say you don't care, some people are that way, then you still, it's just a poor decision for so many other factors involved. But um, a lot of people too, even a lot of Western hunters, they'll like go out one time before they hunt and shoot their gun like once a year.
Hmm.
And they're like, I'm good. And I'm like, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying I've never been guilty of it at some point, but I'm like, I was an idiot and you're an idiot because, and a lot of times I've gone hunting with those same people that didn't, like when I invite them to the range, they didn't go with me and they've messed up. They've either missed or they've shot something in the butt or, it's cost them. And then they want to blame everything else but themselves. And really it's their fault.
Yeah. No, I get that. Like, um, it's like the coyote I shot. I want to say it was a little over a year ago. It was at 686 yards. Literally the first shot. As good of a shot as I am, literally my first shot, because my nerves were just the way they were. I literally shot over his back, and then he started into a full sprint, and that's when I did the headshot on him. But I mean, still, like, I probably shouldn't have taken that follow-up shot since he was in a full sprint. However, it's coyote. They attack more people's pets and farm animals than anything. So I made the decision to do it. But we had Yukikazi jump in here. Hello,
Mm-hmm.
Yuk.
You have a
Um,
bunch of questions about drones too.
oh,
Drones and hunting. I know a little bit about that, so I could touch
I'm
on
like
some of it.
way up here. Like I'm waiting on
Oh,
my
really?
chat. Yeah, this chat's acting super. If I'm not responding to you right away, I'm sorry.
No
This
motorized
chat is
vehicle.
acting super funky on my end. Um, so like I just saw where Yuk jumped in here, and now it just refreshed. So,
No motorized
um,
vehicle. People are talking about. So, like in Wyoming, there's motorized vehicles allowed, but it's restricted to like it depends on what type of public land, and then it depends on how they have the trails marked. So it's a combination. Like the best places to hunt are generally in areas you have to hike, though. Obviously, I mean that's just obvious reasons. Basically, there's less pressure, so the animals are going to go there.
okay, I see the drone
And,
questions here.
yeah.
So John has asked one, and then Duke is talking about them too. Is this where you're talking about the drones?
Yeah, I think they go on a little farther too, but yeah, I have a Mavic Pro drone for
Hmm.
B-roll, for filming B-roll because it's cinematic, right? And Wyoming's weird. They several years ago they didn't have any. We're kind of behind the times. They didn't have any laws, right? And I never used one for hunting purposes, but they didn't have any laws. Then they said you can't use it during certain times of the year, and those certain times of the year were basically you couldn't use it during certain hunting seasons. Like they
Hmm.
made it that way. And then I think, and I could be wrong on this, they changed it more recently because it's like every year they're changing it to where you can't use it to, or you can't hunt the same day you fly like if it was a regular plane, most states you can't fly the same day you hunt. If you fly into Alaska somewhere, you can't hunt that day. And so I think they made it that way here, but then it's always been, I think, for a very long time that in the wording that you couldn't use it to find or recover or pursue game. Like those were the first laws. So even if you could fly it for like B-roll at the start, you couldn't use it to actually like find the game or to recover the game once you'd shot it. And I think drones are fine. I know it's not popular, but if from a filming standpoint, drones are a great tool if used legally. But I don't think obviously they should be used to find or pursue or to recover a game. Recovering is kind of debatable, right? Because you're like, well, just let it rot out there and die. But I think if they muddied that line, then everybody would just be like, well, I'm just recovering game, and it would cause problems for other hunters and things like that. They also have a lot of every year on public land in Wyoming, they make more and more drone restricted areas. They'll just make like certain areas restricted, and they're like getting more and more restrictive, which, it's a two-edged sword. But I think it would be it's probably not in the best interest of conservation to, have everybody flying around drones out there, and every state makes up their own laws on this. And so I don't know what every state is, but I can tell you that much.
So everybody's talking about my tactical sandals now. Appreciate that. There was a question up here. David Wilcott asked, what's a good twist rate for an AR-15? And my question is, David, what is your plan to use that for? Are you going to use it for competition shooting, hunting, survivalist type scenario? What grain projectiles do you want to shoot? What distance are you wanting to shoot? So on and so forth. Because all that goes into a factor on barrel length, twist rate, so on and so forth. So while we're waiting on that, he says hunting. So I'll let you answer that one since you're the AR hunter guy.
No. I'm not. I don't hunt with ARs. I don't. So like I've only hunted with an AR a couple of times.
Okay.
They're really, obviously they're popular for like coyote hunting, varmint hunting. I did shoot a hog with an AR in Florida, but you're the ballistics guy, so I don't even want to answer this one because I know you're going to give a better answer than me, truthfully, on the AR question. Like people that do hunt with ARs out here, they usually aren't AR-15s, they're AR-10s. So
medium to heaviest grain, the 223 or the 5.56. So I have a very nasty load. I mean, it is very, very nasty for 223 with 88 grain projectiles. And I'm sending it out. What is that rifle? I think it's a 1 in 9 or 1 in 8. I can't remember exactly off. It's in my vault. So I would have to go across the house to get in there and look. But with that fast twist rate, it has really stabilized at 88 grain very well. But the issue is that I have come across is with the 88 grain projectile, it is a very long projectile. So these are 140s here for 6.5, and the 88 grain 223 is like this long. It's only whatever quarter inch, half inch shorter than 140 grains for 6.5 Needmore.
Using it for he's going to use it for caribou and rain. What is he using this for?
He said it's native Alaskan. Cousins took down a moose and a good sized caribou. So, Boom Country says 1 in 8, 1 to 7 also, which is where I am. I prefer the 1 in 8.
I wouldn't recommend using a 223 or 5.56 for a moose or a caribou at all, but that's me. If you're native Alaskan, there might be different laws. I know in most places that would be illegal. But
a lot of it's 30 cal, isn't it? Or 30 cal.
Well, not necessarily 30 cal. A lot of it has to do with like It depends on the state. Some it's like bullet weight and things like this and speed. I don't. But I know I know now if he's native, like American Alaskan, then it's probably legal because they have totally different laws from what I understand. But like if it's, I know it'd be legal for me, 100%. And I wouldn't put all that aside. I wouldn't use a cartridge that small on an animal that big. Um, but
Is that because of energy factor, or is it because of?
well, I mean, like, then you get into all these ethical things and things like this and opinions. I think it's just too, yeah, it's not, it's, the terminal ballistics aren't great enough, in my opinion, to ethically, or I shouldn't even need to say ethically, like, safely and efficiently kill an animal. Like if a moose or a caribou is pretty big, um, like I want to pick a caliber now that when human error is involved, I still can find and recover it quickly and don't have it waste, or lose it completely. So like I used to hunt more, and I still like 6.5 Creedmoor, right? And
Mhm,
it's kind of on the ragged edge of acceptable for elk in people's minds. And I've shot elk with it successfully, and I've shot elk with it that died, but went further than I felt was good, right? Or
mhm.
it was like on that risky edge. And so now I tend to go towards like a bigger 30 cal, not even a 308. 308 works a lot on elk. People hunt it with it a lot, but like I'm a human. So when I make that mistake and it's 6 inches off of where it should be or a foot off of where it should be, I'd rather have something that gives me way more forgiveness, right? That's still going to have that terminal effect. It's going to make a massive wound cavity. It's going to give me a bigger blood trail probably, so I can trail it if it runs. Um, things like that. So like and so those are reasons why I would rather go heavier than light. But bullet construction matters a lot when hunting, and it's something I looked for years and probably still overlook too much is bullet construction, especially depending on the caliber and the distance. If you have a bullet just fragments and doesn't penetrate at all, obviously it might still put the animal down somewhere, but if it gets in the timber and you don't have a blood trail because there's not an exit, because a lot of times if you shoot something that doesn't have an entrance and an exit, it's really good to kill it, but it doesn't leave you much for a blood trail. And so if you can't trail it, that's an issue sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I use 300 PRC, 300 Win Mag on an elk, like an elk up. I would recommend 300 Win Mag or bigger. On on my caribou, I used a 6.5 RPM, which is a really pretty souped up 6.5 compared for a factory offering, but and it worked fine.
So Boom Country is saying that he doesn't use a 223 for anything other than coyote.
Okay.
Now I have used it for pig. It works decent for pig, but you're taking headshots on pigs. So,
And
um,
I used it for pig too, and it's one of those funny things, right? Like society kind of dictates it a little bit, maybe. Like where it's ethical to shoot a coyote or a pig pretty much any way you want because they're
yeah.
so destructive and such a varmint, right? That we kind of
Mhm.
had this separate clause for them where it might not be ethical for a whitetail, but I'm not even gonna get, but you know what I mean. And so like I've shot a pig with a 223 before, but um, it is what it is. Uh, but yeah, for coyote, 6 ARC is probably a little overkill, huh? What do you think of 6 ARC in an AR platform?
So I am really flirting with the idea of six arc. I have had a reamer. I've got a barrel blank. I got a 6 millimeter barrel blank right now. I've had a reamer for the six arc in my shopping cart at Brunel's for probably 2 months now. I have the dies, I have the brass, but I have not bought the reamer yet because I'm still only flirting with it. We haven't quite made that step over the Brit. We've only been on one date, so you know. We haven't even paid for each other's dinner yet. So, um,
Have you ever?
but
Yeah. Have you ever shot Isn't it 204 Ruger? Is a really popular varmint cartridge out here, but I think most. I think that. I don't think. I could be. This is really stupid. I can't. I know a lot of guys old in the bolt actions. I don't know if there's even a AR version of that.
there is
But
Wilson Combat makes a 204 Ruger semi-auto. I want to say Smith and Smesson
hmm,
used to make one, and Ruger I think made one, and I know Savage made one, but I know
yeah,
100% that Wilson Combat still makes one. Um,
interesting.
but it's also like I want to say the Wilson Combat 204 Ruger is like $3,200. It is some
Yeah,
crazy number.
yeah,
Like for that, I would just get a 20 caliber barrel blank and make a 20 tactical, in my opinion.
yeah.
But that's neither here neither there. So, but um, so let's talk a little bit about this Alaskan trip. Like, it looked like it was a trip of a lifetime that you had with Chuck and everything like that. But y'all had some pretty interesting endeavors that happened with a boating accident. So,
um, it was interesting. It was eventful. I'd never been to Alaska. Um, I think overall the trip was a success. But yeah, Chuck flipped his raft in the SAG, I guess is how you. It's the nickname for. I will never pronounce it. Say blah blah blah. Super long name. Can't say it. Up there by Fruto Bay, and he flipped his raft within, I don't know, the first 30 minutes in the water. Maybe it might have been longer than that, but and then he lost his rifle. So like I was up. I always get this mixed up. I was downriver from him by about 100 yards, probably. And we were going along, and everything seemed pretty good in alpaca rafts. And I had a little bit bigger raft than him, and he had a smaller raft than me because he likes it better. But he's a much larger person, so he probably should have taken the bigger raft. But then it's hard for him to get in and out. Anyway, he had the smaller raft. I was upriver, everything's fine. Water, I don't really know like white water levels. I just know it wasn't too bad. Like we're just going with the flow. And I had bought a really nice new paddle though that I actually gave to him to keep right before we left on the trip because he didn't have another good paddle. So he had the raft, but I bought a good paddle. And we're about 100. I'm 100 yards up. We're going along. We're everything's fine. And then I like look back and I'm like, oh, what? He's back there. And then I heard some like noise, but I couldn't really hear very well because like the water sound and my hearing's not that, like I didn't really hear that much. Like I just barely heard some muffles coming. So I look back and he's like standing up and his raft looked like it was like on its side or upside, but it was like confusing because I'm like, at first I'm trying to see what's going on because it was, it just was that way. And I'm like, oh, he must have flipped his raft. And I was like, okay. I was like, okay, well, I mean, he was standing up. The river was only a couple feet deep where it was happened. So he was standing up. He had the raft. So I'm like, okay, like, and he was flipping it back over. So he flips it back over, and I'm kind of like, okay, well, it's not like the end of the world potentially because he had waders on. So I try to get over. The current's pretty strong, but I try to get over to a sandbar at the side where I can beach my raft quickly, obviously. So I beach my raft to where it's not going to float away on me as quickly as I can. And luckily, I see like half a paddle underneath, like a foot under the water, floating towards downriver downstream. So I get in position, like a linebacker or something. I get his half a paddle, thank God, because if that hadn't happened, Lord knows what would have happened. And he's yelling and screaming and pretty upset. And but I can't really hear what he's saying. And then I see another dry bag floating down to me. So I grab the dry bag, which is also like the trip would have been over had I not been in position to get those two things. That would have been it.
Yeah.
So I get those and I get to him and he's pretty worked up. He's missing his gun. Couldn't find his Savage, which is his favorite gun, even though it's a piece of junk. But anyway, he's missing his gun rifle, so he's freaking out. And I was a little bit indifferent probably, but I was like pretty calm. I'm just like, whatever, man. Like, chill out. Like, I have a gun. Like, we have two guns. Like, we have one gun now. We're still good. And I was mainly concerned about what happened to the other half of the paddle, which was actually the biggest. That to me, that was a really big deal, and we never found it. His bat paddle had broken in half. So buy an expensive paddle if you go out. Don't get a cheap one because this was cheap one, broke in half. So he lost half his paddle, and I'm trying to help like grid search the river for his gun, but you can't like see because it wasn't that clear that day. So I'm kind of like feeling with my feet in waders, and he found it. And man, he was the happiest guy alive. Somehow he's like stepped on it and felt it, and he found it. So he found his Savage. He had a half a paddle. After that, the trip got a little interesting. The rest of that day was interesting. We'll put it that way. He wasn't. I think he was a little worried and a little crabby for a while, which is understandable.
Yeah, I mean,
We yeah I kind of kept pushing him. We're like round the next bend. So we got in not to where I wanted us to camp, but we got within like a half mile of where we had planned to camp, and that's as far as he wasn't willing to go any further with a half a paddle, which makes sense. We didn't have life jackets on, which if I was going to do it over again, I'd get some really thin like whitewater jacket.
mhm.
Um, uh, so, but it worked out. You know, I got a caribou only the first whole day of hunting, and I just took the first legal one I could take. You know,
Mhm.
I didn't try for a big one or anything like that. Um, Pack out was interesting. I had like the first 1,200 yards because he didn't make it to where I was. First, he was kind of like go on ahead, and then he was gonna come, but then he got lost, or we kind of got separated,
Mhm.
not lost, but separated, and so he never made it to where the caribou died. So I ended up processing it myself, and then I had to pack it about 1,200 yards by myself, which in the tundra, when you're already about 3 days of fatigue, like three
Mhm.
days of exercise, and you know, even just flying to like 3 or 4 days into this, it was quite a bit because it was my pack weighed, I'm guessing 130 pounds,
Oh
which
wow.
is way more than I ever want to pack or think is safe. I've done it one or two other times in life, and I've always said I'm never going to do that again because it's way too risky, like injury. And so I didn't have my trekking poles because I had left him with him. And not I just had kind of took off. So I mean that was totally my fault. I just kind of left him with him. And so I didn't have my trekking poles and I'm walking through like those like it's like just tussocks, right? With
Mhm.
swamp. And so every step is like an ankle breaker with a 130-pound pack and no trekking poles. And at one point I was so tired and I had to go through about 3 feet of water in a little like boggy area. And I was thinking to myself, if I fall down face first, I will probably literally just drown because like I won't even be able to turn over. I was that fatigued and that pack was that heavy. And I don't really know how much it weighed. All I know is it had an entire caribou in it. So like it had an entire skinned and quartered, but it had an entire caribou in it. So I'm like it was so heavy that I had to roll over laying flat, get like crunch up and then use all my strength just to stand up. That's how heavy the pack was. Um,
Yeah.
so I ran into him after about 1,200 yards, and we went a mile and a half probably after that, or something like that. And he took some of the meat, and I got the trekking poles, and so it was still grueling. It was still like my pack was still probably 100 pounds, but it was. I would never recommend that to anybody. Like I won't do it again, right? Like I would take multiple trips, make sure you have multiple people with you where the kill is because like it's not worth it. The risk is too great. Like I did one other time, I did like a half an elk, which is huge, by myself in the mountains, and that wasn't even as bad as this. And my knee hurt for like 4 months, and I said I'd never do it again. Cause like I was by myself that time too. Like I was at 9,500 feet in a snowstorm by myself, and nobody would have, if I had broken my legs, I don't know what would have happened. And another thing, I guess I could recommend a rescue beacon too, a satellite communicator. I had one on the Alaska trip. I didn't used to have one, but my friend last year, I think it was last year, got a cow elk about 5 miles, I think, off the road, shattered his shattered his leg packing it out, and had to crawl 2 to 3 miles just to get in cell phone service to call somebody to get rescued. And that's actually after that, I was like, you know what? I'm like, try to be hardcore. I'm a man. I don't need that. And then I was like, but I went out and bought one. So like,
It's
it
always better
worked.
to be safe than sorry.
Yeah. And it's mine. You can like hook it to your cell phone. It's called a Zoleo. It's made in Canada, but it's like it's one of the cheapest ones, I think, for like, because you have to pay a monthly subscription to the satellite service.
Hmm.
It's only like $20 a month, and you can cancel and start it back up. But you can connect it to your phone and do unlimited texting, which is kind of nice. Like anywhere in the world. And
Is
it's
that
worked.
how you were doing like your shorts and stuff that you were
No,
uploading?
no. So actually, ironically, like southeast of Prudhoe Bay, only like 5 to 10 miles up on the plateau. There's a name for this plateau. I don't. It's beyond the Sag River. We were up on when I was up on top of that. I was actually in spots getting 4G service.
That's wild.
Yeah, by the like you're up there by like the Arctic Ocean, and I was getting 4G services in areas. So that's actually how I uploaded a couple of those shorts. The satellite communicator I have doesn't do internet service, or at least not my plan. It does like you can text, you can't call, and you can send like an SOS signal for rescue and stuff like really like that type of thing.
So just strictly an emergency safe line.
You can do an SOS function, you can do pre-text, or you can connect it to your Sony phone and use it to actually text people like normal. It just
Oh,
takes a little longer. But they have like different, but I do recommend them. They never sponsor me. They don't give me anything. But that Zoleo, I think it's one of the most affordable and best, and it's worked fantastic everywhere I've gone. Alaska, Wyoming, 10,000 feet down to sea level and back. And it's a great little device. I think it's
gotcha.
more affordable than the other. I wanted to say it was more affordable and had better reviews than a lot of the other, like there's a bunch of others out there that are like the mainstream ones, and this company seemed to be doing better. But
Gotcha. So I've got a question for you. So I'm not a huge hunter, but I do hunt groundhogs with crossbows. I love crossbow hunting for groundhogs. Don't ask me why. Maybe it's the challenge of it. I don't know, but I love it. Um, can you recommend me a good crossbow? Something that if I decided to get into deer hunting with a crossbow, um, but also be efficient, obviously, for groundhog, because that's really the main thing I hunt.
yeah. So, well, the first thing with crossbows is they're they're always going to break or blow apart at some point. Doesn't mean they can't be repaired necessarily. But in my opinion, and from other people that I've talked to, just going into crossbows at some point is probably going to blow apart, whether that's the string or something coming apart. Of
Hmm.
course, bows, I think compound bows in general are kind of that way, but crossbows even more because they're held under such ridiculous tension for such long periods of time, especially if you leave them cocked, which is when, like you go out hunt, most people will cock it, which
Hmm.
is fine, but it's just something to be aware of. Um, the I had a Barnett Jackal, which is like the really cheap, what would be considered crappy crossbow, and actually worked fantastic for me. Never had a single problem. It was incredibly accurate.
That's what that one is back there.
Okay. Have you had any issues with it?
Mm-mm. I popped a code or a groundhog with it last year, and it ricocheted off the rib cage and actually lifted the groundhog and pinned it into a tree.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
mine was fine. It's a like a wider axle to
yeah,
axle because it's cheaper, things like that. It's not that great, but it does the job. It did the job for me. Um,
that's my thing with it. It does what I need it to do,
right.
especially for groundhogs. I mean, I'm shooting them. I literally shoot groundhogs out of the window of my house because they've been destroying my building. So I
Hmm.
literally just shoot them out of my house. And I live in town, so it's not like I can get out my 338 Lapua or my 50 BMG and just blow it to smithereens.
Yeah, you're in
I've got to be
Kentucky.
somewhat ethic. Yeah.
Um, I have a PSE Fang XT now that's been discontinued. You probably could still buy one now. I think it's the PSE Fang HD or HD Pro. I think is replaced or maybe some other model. So mostly good experiences with those. After about 3 years of use, mine blew apart. They did take care of me though. I sent it. I did have to send it in, but I don't think I paid anything even for shipping. Maybe I did, but I don't think so because you ask for a shipping label if that happens. They try to make you pay. A lot of places will try to make you pay shipping unless you push it. But they fixed it up fine and put it all back together, and it's been great ever since. I don't know that that would be really their fault as much as just crossbows and
Mhm.
use. That was a good crossbow. I know a couple people that own the PSE Fang crossbows. A lot of them have beat theirs up and used it and never had any problem that I had. I know a guy last year, the guy who took the bull elk in my bull elk film last year, older guy. He took his with a PSE Fang um, in, uh, in that video. Um, you can go to 10 point or to like Raven if you want just a crazy, like shoot 100 yards type crossbow,
Mhm.
but you're going to really pay super steep and probably diminishing returns on your money, kind of. I have the Raven R500. It's the second most expensive crossbow, probably, or third most expensive crossbow. It might be the most. It's way up there.
Mhm.
At one point, it debatably the fastest. Depending on what bolt you use, I guess the 10-point nitro could be faster with different bolts.
Yeah,
But
like I've
anyway,
talked to Boom Country about it because he's a bow tech
hmm
also and a gunsmith. And like just I want opinions of everybody kind of, you know what I mean?
yeah, I think Raven is you're paying way too much money, and a lot of things are proprietary or kind of proprietary. Where now you got to get their bolts. Now you got to do this. Now you got to do that. And if you want to, be on the safe side at least, and it gets crazy expensive. So like those mid-level crossbows, I can't think of like even the older Ravens, like the original R9 might not be a bad way to go. But
Mhm.
like if you want to like shoot 100 yards. But like if you I think I can't remember all the models, but like I'd say like try to find one that's mid-priced that you can still use like your average 20-inch bolt with that like a pile driver that's affordably affordable rather than getting a crossbow that's going to say now you got to use these bolts because they are the only ones that can not blow apart, on a bow. So you know what I mean? So like if you get a bow that's a crossbow that's just crazy, it's going to say, well, now you need special bolts because a regular bolt, the knock's going to break, the shaft's going to crack. And that might be true. And so like then you're forced to buy these really expensive things on a regular basis instead of like get a crossbow that's maybe even like 400 feet per second, but can use regular pile driver bolts that are cheaper and maybe regular broadheads without having issues. And that way you're saving money in the long term, but you can still probably shoot 80 yards as long as you get a good scope. The one thing with like a package crossbow that comes with a scope is like it's like rifles. Most of the time, the scopes are kind of like usable, but like you want to replace the scope if you're really going to use it hard.
Yeah.
Because the scopes are generally not going to. They're either going to limit you, or they're just not going to be reliable, or they're going to be, just not good glass. And so replacing the scope on a crossbow is kind of like, you buy a Savage Axis 2. What do you do if you want to just make it a little bit better? Replace the scope. So
No, that's my big fuss with that one is I've never put a different scope or
The
anything
red
on it.
dot, that red dot, it doesn't have the red dot.
Yeah,
Like
it's got like that triple
mm-hmm.
prong red
20,
dot in
30,
there.
and 20, 30, 40 yards. Yeah, each dot you start at 20. Yeah.
Uh, it's awful. Um,
Nikon had a really good crossbow scope was really good for the money out. And I don't know if they still, I mean, Nikon kind of got out of the scope game. So I don't know if they're still for sale floating around, but they had a really good scope. I can't remember the name of it, but it was specifically for crossbows, which you really want because the reticle is made for a crossbow and a crossbow scope. So
yeah. I just haven't quite. I haven't pulled the trigger. No pun intended. I just dropped $2,200 on a transfer case and labor for my truck today. So me buying a crossbow is in the near future, but it's not going to be like tomorrow, if that makes sense. Um, between everything else going on and life and things like that. But it
yeah,
is what it is.
I would just around Black Friday, even like, I mean, I would say don't buy and expect like a really expensive, crazy crossbow because I just don't think it's worth it. Like you might get an extra 10, 20 yards out of it, maybe, but that's like kind of debatable. And it's like the cost, I don't think it's worth it. And
Gotcha.
Raven, like mine, the knocks were breaking and each bolt is like $60 or something. Or maybe not, it's like $30 or for one bolt, one arrow on, because you have to have the R500 bolts to go with the R5 because they're beefier.
Hmm.
But the knocks they fixed it and they did send me replacement ones, but the knocks were just like the first shot, the knocks were just breaking or inserts were coming out. You're like, this is crazy. Like it's like a $3,500 crossbow with like a $60 between the, like, if you have a broadhead and the bolt, it's like you're shooting like $40. Let's just say $40 every time. And then it's breaking. Like you're like, that's nuts. That makes ammunition look cheap.
Well, that's what I was about to say is I can shoot just about everything I have once. If well, no, I can't say that. I could definitely shoot 338 Lapua, 50 BMG twice out of each one and still be less than $40
Boom
with
Country
my
works at a
ammo.
Raven dealer, huh?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the store that he works at, but he's in North Dakota. Um,
They do still make recurve. Dave Walcott. They make recurve, and there are places I can't remember the company. There's one company that's all they make is recurve crossbows, and
mhm,
actually, if you're looking at like a survival situation, like if you're a prepper, I'm not really that much, but if you are, those are a good way to go because replacing the string is like 1,000 times easier. You don't need a bow press. Like you can do that on your own,
mhm.
and so and they're more reliable probably as well. There's less moving parts. Um, Crank crossbow normalizers brought so like the caveat to using a crank crossbow is that it's going to take you way longer probably to reload if you need to make a follow-up shot while you're hunting. Whereas if you have uh, cocking ropes for a regular crossbow, it's pretty quick to reload.
So Normalizer, he was talking about this a minute ago. He got he was at a stop sign and got hit on his
Ooh,
motorcycle by an SUV.
mm,
So he said he's not crippled, but well,
yeah.
first he says he's crippled now, but he says not really crippled, but he has chronic pain,
Yeah. Well,
which
yeah.
so it
One of the cool
is.
things, one of the cool things about a crank crossbow is most of them you can unload really easily without having to shoot. Like most regular crossbows are, there's ways, but it's easiest to just shoot it, right? To unload it.
Mhm.
Whereas with a lot of crank crossbows, you can just crank it down, which is really nice. Or like not all of them, but like my Raven R500, I don't have to shoot it now, and I better not because I'd probably lose $60 if I did.
Yeah.
But um, yeah, I harvested a bear with my PSE Fang, and I was like, do I bring the Raven or do I bring the PSE Fang? And I was like, well, the Raven's breaking knocks every time I shoot it, and I don't trust it. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to bring the $3,500 crossbow. I'm going to bring the $350 crossbow. And I smoked a bear, like luckiest best shot of my life at like 45 yards or 40 yards.
Mhm.
And I didn't, the bolt, the broadhead was ruined. I'm thinking like right there, like if you think about it, it's like I didn't choose to use the expensive thing because of the issues and the concerns, or the fact I might have lost money, right?
Mhm.
So like it's funny how that works sometimes, but um
Oh, I agree.
yeah, I would just get a mid-grade crossbow that's just got solid reviews.
That's what I'm
But
looking at is between like the 600 to $1,000 range, which puts me in like high low tier, mid tier, low high tier. Does that make sense?
yeah, and I would just I mean like, and you can get, they're getting faster every year. Like I'm sure you can get one that's crazy fast, super accurate, and that you could probably use, a little bit cheaper bolts with that aren't like
Oh,
proprietary.
that's where
Um,
Big Country works is running.
oh yeah. I've heard of them. Don't they? I've been on their website too. They have a website, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
The
I wonder
way
if
he
they.
explained it is it's kind of like a farm and fleet back where I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I'm initially from Wisconsin.
Mm.
So we had Farm and Fleet,
Wisconsin.
Cabela's, Bass Pro, things like that. And he said it's kind of like Farm and Fleet. But here they've got Farm and Fleet too, but it's called Royal King.
They have. I've been in those. I think I've been in the runnings too. Like out here, they have what Shipton's Big R. They have Tractor Supply.
Yeah,
But Sportsman's Warehouse is kind of and then is kind of the big one out here for guns and hunting. And then they have Rocky Mountain Discount Sports, which is more like this local. It's not. There's like one in Nebraska, I think, but there's like it's mostly Wyoming, and they're like they're guns and hunting. It's kind of like a smaller version of Sportsman's. It's kind of like
how far
what
from Champaign are you?
I don't even know. I'm not. So Billings has a Shields and a Cabela's, and the Shields I love. The Shields in Billings is fantastic. That place is it's the only place. It's almost the only place you can go buy a gun, and if you don't like it, you can return it after shooting it for a full refund. Which
That's crazy.
yeah, that's
How does
it's
that work with the 4473?
I don't know. All I know is like, and I had one for 6 months too, and they're like, yeah, you can return it. I was like, wow. Like
That's
that's
crazy.
crazy. It's a case. I was told it's like a case by case thing. Like you can return it, but if it's like extended, like it says longer than 30 days, they're probably gonna like case by case it, right? Like, did
Yeah,
you trash this gun? Did you do something? Like, what's the story here? You know what I mean? So I can't, but I can say within 30 days, it'd probably be pretty consistent. I think they would return it, and I mean that's what they told me. So it, I just like the place. Like it's got a great selection, good staff.
I don't know
They're
why I
pro.
said Champaign. I meant to say Cheyenne.
Oh, Cheyenne. Cheyenne, I'm pretty far from now. I'm like 5 hours maybe, something like that.
Gotcha.
Four and a half at least, probably.
We were talking about Wisconsin, then an Illinois city popped in my head. I don't.
Mm.
Uh, anyways, but so we're gonna wrap it up. Tell everybody what you do, where they can find you, and how they can get a hold of you if they want to chat with you, so on and so forth. They want to follow you on the socials.
Yeah, so Bullets for Bucks is the YouTube channel, and it's bullets the number 4 bucks, all one word. Like I said, hunting gear reviews, rifle reviews, optics reviews, hunts. Got tons coming. I put out a lot of content. Never mind the shorts. If you don't like shorts, don't watch my shorts because they're mainly to grow the channel right now. But I have 2 full-length videos, 2 regular videos coming out every. One comes out Friday, one comes out Sunday every day. Um, so that's YouTube. I got a Facebook page, Bolts for Bucks, Instagram, Bolts for Bucks, but I don't really do Instagram anymore very much. I might more in the future. But you can try to message me on the Facebook page. Bullets for Bucks is probably the best way to get a hold of me, because I do check that. Yeah, TikTok I got banned like 3 times from, so screw TikTok. But yeah, so that's how to find me, and ask me hunting questions or guns and optics questions. But mostly I know more in the wheelhouse of bolt action hunting rifles, or scopes that pertain to hunting more than probably anything else. But yeah.
Gotcha. Well, guys, I appreciate everybody for stopping by. Steven's channel is posted in the description. And if you want to help support the channel, my Cash App is in the description too. If you feel like you want to support, that's cool. If not, that's cool too. But I appreciate everybody for stopping by, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.
Have a good night.